Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to this last day of the training, the boot camp. Okay, so I've just checked the audio and the video clarity on my other device. It's absolutely fine. So if anybody's having any issues with their sound quality or anything, please do re-log in once again. Now, in today's session, we have a plan where we will be working with a final project that we will be working with. It's going to be a very uh, complex project where I'm going to be pulling in data from an SQL server, and I'm going to show you how to connect to the SQL server as well. And then I'm going to show you how to start from scratch with respect to dealing with it. So let me just quickly share my screen, and I'm going to show you the database that I will be connecting to. So I have my Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio that I'm going to be starting off. Let's close these not required things. Okay, just 1 minute. Let me just stop the screen share. Okay, so here I have my SQL server, and I'm going to be connecting to this particular server so that I will be able to access the database that I would want to work with and connect with respect to my data and the report generation for this particular session. So I'm going to connect to this SQL server, and here on the left hand side you can see all the databases. So the database that I will be working with for now is going to be this AdventureWorks DW 2020 database. Now if I just expand this, you will see I have different tables in it, and these are some of the tables that you see, like the dim table. So if you see, I've got a lot of tables that have got the prefix dim. Like these are the ones that are all having the prefix dim. Now dim basically stands for dimension, and then I've got this fact. This basically stands for the transaction tables or fact tables that you will be normally working with. Now we have understood how we can deal with visualizations. We've understood how to work with slicers, and we've also looked at some of the basic DAX calculations as well. So today we are going to start working with the entire third case study, where I'm going to start from scratch and I'm going to take you through a very complex set of transformations, and I'm going to be doing this a little quickly. So I would want you to be attentive, and I will not really pause in between to kind of take a lot of understanding on that. So please make sure that you people are with me during this time. Okay, so to begin with, I'm going to open up Power BI, and I'm going to connect to my SQL server. So in order to connect to it, I will first look at the name of the SQL server. So I'm going to look at the properties, and the name is my surname with just a hyphen DT. So I will connect to an SQL server, which is going to be the data source that I will be using for this. So I'll put in the name of the server and click OK. Now, when I click OK, so I'm just looking at the points here. Good evening, sir. Can you please provide some contact number so that we can talk to some admin people? You can put it in the chat. The admin people are monitoring the chat as well. Great, Vinod. You're most welcome. Hope to see you for all the other boot camps of Let's Upgrade as well. Okay, good evening. So I think Anam, who has been a fantastic coordinator for the entire boot camp, she has put in a lot of information about the attendance and certificates. So please do look at it. And again, I request all of you to please note that we do keep conducting a lot of boot camps in the areas of data analytics and other areas like data science and everything, and also maybe digital marketing and all that. So please stay tuned to Let's Upgrade's channel, and please see that you people come here and be here. Obviously, yes, certificates are a benchmark, but try to gain as much as knowledge as possible, because Let's Upgrade puts in a lot of effort to get all their trainers from the industry and helps you to learn a lot from the industry perspective. So please ensure that you people, when you're here, when you're part of any of the boot camps, you're making the maximum use of this particular boot camp, because the people who are going to be conducting boot camps for you in the future as well are all people from the industry, and they do have tremendous amount of experience. So please take a lot of benefit from that. Anyways, so I am now interested in this particular database. So I'm going to simply click on the drop down arrow for this database to see and reveal all the tables in the database. Now here is the first step that I'm performing, that is connecting to the data. So there are a few important tables that I will be pulling in into this particular data, or into my 1 minute. I'm just switching this on. Give me 1 minute, please. Okay. So here what we are going to do is we are going to go ahead and pull in some data. So before I do that, let me just do one thing. Let me begin by selecting the tables. So the tables that I'm more or less interested in is first the employee table. Now this data is actually a data set for a company that is into sales of different products. That is Adventure Works, basically more or less into bicycles and stuff. Okay, bikes, and in the Western Hemisphere, bicycles are referred to as bikes. Okay, so bikes, clothing, accessories, along with all the other things. Now, if I select a particular table here, you will see the preview available. Now, this is a SQL database. So when you're working with a database, the approach is going to be entirely different. So I'm going to select the checkbox for employee. Then I'm going to click on employee sales territory. I'm going to click on the DIM product table. Then I'm also going to look out for the DIM reseller table, then the sales territory table, and the fact reseller sales table. Now, each of these tables have got some information about the company. The first one, DIM employee, has got the employee table. The second one has got the employee and the sales territory combination table. That means which employee is catering to which sales territory. Like, for example, you have one of the employee catering to Mumbai market, or Pune market, Ahmedabad market, etc., etc., etc. Then you've got DIM product. This is your product catalog or the product database. Then you've got the reseller. So reseller is basically the person who purchases from the company and resells it. Like, for example, you've got Apple resellers, Samsung resellers, like that. So you have resellers for this particular company as well. Then you've got the DIM sales territory. So these are the various sales territories that the companies operate in. Okay. Then we've got the reseller sales table. Now, the reseller sales table is actually the entire transaction table, which gives you all the information. Okay. Now, obviously, I'm not going to load it directly. So I'm going to go and transform the data. As I mentioned, there's a lot of transformations in this particular part of our entire data. Now, once you've opened up the Power Query, you can see in different tables, you have different number of columns and rows in the tables. Okay. So you can see here, you've got about 33 columns and 296 rows of data in the employee table. And each table has got its set of rows and columns in it. Now, to begin with, here I'm going to first look at, if you look at the data preview pane, in some of the tables, when you scroll to the right, you've got these value columns. Now, these value columns, the 5 columns that are there, they basically are used for the relationships for other tables in the database. So they can be used to join your tables together and create something which is more or less used for relationships in your data. So now here what we're going to do is we are first going to look at the quality of the data. I did mention that when I look at the data, I need to first look at the quality. So I'm going to go to the view tab, and I'm going to click on column quality. Now, the moment you click on column quality, uh, Rajguru, zoom the screen. I mean, yeah. So, Bhagyanand, the data set that I'm using right now is not amongst any of the data sets that you have. Yes, there is a similar data set called as AW data set. You just pay attention to what's happening here, and you'll understand what needs to be done with your data set later on. Okay. But for now, just pay attention here. And regarding the zooming of the screen, if I zoom in too much, I will not be able to cover everything. So Rajiguru, I'm already working on a large screen, and I believe the screen is going to be very much visible. I would recommend you move on to a slightly larger screen if possible. Otherwise, this is something that I mean, I'll not be able to cover everything for you. Okay, so that is something that you'll have to bear with me. I'm extremely sorry about it, because if I zoom in, then the entire concepts will not be cleared and covered together. Okay, so here you can see when I use column quality is going to give you information about how many how many valid entries are there, what is the percentage of empty cells, etc. in that column. So I want you to pay attention to this position column. Here you can see that only 6% entries in the column position are valid, whereas 94% of them are not there, that are empty. So this is one thing that we can identify from the column quality option. Now let's look at the column distribution. So if I use column distribution option here, it gives me in each of the columns how many unique and how many distinct counts of that particular value are there. So here, when the distinct and unique counts are same, for example, here I've got the employee key. So this column is a good candidate to become a primary key, because please remember, all the ones that have got the dim prefixed, okay, are the master tables, and the transaction table is the one that has the fact prefix to the name of the table. Please keep this in mind. So here you need to have a column which is unique in every table, because when you have that, it becomes easier for you to connect to the transaction table. Now, when you model it, the some model tables have unique columns, and these can be used to create one-to-many relationships, which we will be also looking at in the modeling part of it. Okay, now different queries have different number of rows and columns. Now here what I need to do is I also need to look at the column profile. So what I will do is I will look out for the column profile in the reseller table, and here when I look at column profile, I will select business type for this. Now obviously you will be wondering, how do I know which column to go to, etc. I have used this data set in the past, that's the reason I have been able to do this for you. But you will need to somehow try to search what the problems are in the long run in your data set, whatever data set you're working with. So here, if you notice, I've got this warehouse and warehouse. Now there's a slight difference in the spelling, and this is the incorrect spelling, whereas the one above it without the space is the correct spelling for warehouse. Okay, so please understand that there are 5. If I hover on this particular bar here, you can see there are 5 entries with the incorrect spelling of warehouse. So we need to fix all these problems during our data cleaning stage. Now we also need to pull in data that comes in from the targets data and the colors data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go to the home tab. So there are 2 more data sources that I will be pulling my data from. One is the CSV file for color formats, and the other one is the CSV file for the targets data. So here I'm going to go ahead to the new source and click on text/CSV. When I do that, I will need to search for where this data is already existing. So I'll just look out for this in data. I have the PL300 folder. So here I'm going to go to my resources, and then I'll look out for color formats. Sorry, first I'll pick up reseller sales targets, open it, and here you can see that the data that I have is basically pivoted data. It is consolidated data. And remember, whenever you're working with Power BI, or whenever you're working in this kind of a situation, you cannot afford to put in pivoted data or consolidated data. Okay, so what we are going to do here is we are going to just click OK for now, and I'm going to perform transformations on this later on. So I've got one more table called as the reseller sales targets. Now there's one more table that I need to pull in. That's again a new source. I will use text/CSV, and I'll pull in text colors formats.csv. Now here you can see there's a problem that the first row is actually supposed to be the header, and the header is supposed to be, so this first row is supposed to be promoted as the header because it doesn't have any header in the data for now. So we'll just click on OK and we'll move ahead. Now what we will do is we will go ahead and transform this data. Now transformation of the data is going to be relatively one of the most complex scenario, because every single query is going to undergo some transformation, and we are going to be performing certain changes, or we're going to delete some files, delete some columns, etc. Now from here on, at this point onwards, be very careful with what's actually happening and try to understand this. So before I move ahead in transformation, I'm just going to click on refresh preview and click refresh all, so that all the data will be refreshed while working with it. Now the first thing I'm going to start off with is the dim employee table. Now this dim employee table is something that I need to work with, but I only want to work with salespeople. This is giving me information about every single department in the data. So we've got about 296 rows, which means 296 employees in the data. So first thing, I'm going to go ahead and delete the name dim employee and replace it with salesperson. And this is my first step of working with the transformation. Now here, after I change the name to salesperson, I will choose certain columns that I would want to deal with. But before I choose any columns, I only want to work with salespeople in this particular data set. So in order to search the salesperson table, I mean the salesperson column, I can scroll to the right, or salesperson flag column, I can scroll to the right and search for it. Or I have another option under this choose columns option. I can click on go to column. So when I click on go to column, I do have the option go to column, and here I'm going to search for a salesperson flag column and click OK. Now when I do this, I do have the salesperson flag column selected. I click on the drop down and I remove the false flag. And when I click OK, you will notice that there are only 18 salespeople that we are dealing with. Only 18 people over here. Now, immediately you will notice that there is a filtered rows that actually is going to be shown. Just 1 minute. There's a problem with this software of mine. Okay, so here you can see that there's a new step created in the applied steps area called filtered rows. Now the good part is you only perform the transformation once, and automatically all the transformations will be applied whenever new data comes in. Now the question is, in the salesperson table, I need only a few columns. So I'm going to go to choose columns, and from here I'm going to click choose columns once again, and I'm going to uncheck everything and pick up only a few columns. To begin with, employee key, employee national ID alternate key, first name, last name, then the title of the individual, and finally the email address of the people, and click OK. So I now have only 6 columns that I'm actually dealing with. Now here I need to create a single column out of the first name and the last name. So I'll merge it and I'll call it as salesperson. Now, how do I merge it? I'm going to select the first column and then hold down the control key and select the second column. Now you can right click on this and you can click on the option merge columns. Now when you merge it, you will be asked what is the separator you want between the two columns data. So it's always better to have a separator in terms of text. So here I'm going to click the drop down and I'm going to use space as my separator. And let's call the name of the column as salesperson. Now here you can see that I've created a new column and the number of columns have now shrunk to 5. So I've got salesperson, I've got the title of the salesperson, then I have the email address, the employee national ID alternate key, and the employee key. Now, after we do this, we need to ensure that we rename some of the columns. So for employee national ID alternate key, we are going to replace it with employee ID. So here I'm just going to change it from employee to employee ID and hit enter. So I've taken care of the employee key, the employee ID. Now I've also dealt with the title, with the salesperson column being one instead of having two distinct columns for name and last name. So at the end of the thing, we should have about 5 columns and 18 rows of data. When we do have this, we are now ready to proceed ahead. Obviously, this is not a benchmark number of how many columns and out of how many columns should be available. But whatever columns we needed, we've taken. Whatever we've not required, we've just kept them away. Let me tell you, at any point in time, if you feel that the column needs to be added back, you can easily add it back for yourself. I don't know what Alkesh, what you're trying to say. The singing premi. Okay, so I don't know what exactly that is. Fine. So next is the salesperson region query. So here I'm going to select the dim employee sales territory query, and I'm going to first thing is rename this to salesperson region query. Salesperson region. Okay, so this is now the next thing that we have. Now here I need to remove the last two columns, that is the dim employee and dim sales territory. These are two connecting columns which we don't require right now. So I'm going to select both of them by holding down the control key and deleting it. Now the next step is, you can see you've got 2 columns and 39 rows. Now please remember, when you're doing this, try to remember what is done and how you're proceeding with this particular analysis. Next is the dim product table. Now under the dim product table, obviously we don't need the prefix dim, so I'm just going to remove that dim from the name of the table, and we have just product. Now here again, I've got some products that have not been finished, so there's a finished goods flag. You can use the same method. Go to choose and go to column, choose columns, go to column, and from here you will look out for a finished goods column. So finished goods flag, click on OK, and here we've got the finished goods flag mentioned. Now out of these, we need to fix and we need to filter out all those that are not the finished goods. So I'm going to click the drop down and I'm going to click on false and click OK. So this time we have about 40 columns and 397 rows of data that we are dealing with. So we have 397 products in the business. Now here I need only a few columns. So again, I'm going to go to choose columns and I'm going to just click and remove all the columns for now, and I'm going to keep product key. Obviously we need the key columns for every single table. Remember that, because these are all going to be used to connect to the actual fact table. Now here I've picked up product key, English product name, then the standard cost, and then we are also looking at color and the dim product subcategory. So color and dim product subcategory here at the bottom. Now, please remember that in such a case, okay, I'm just looking at the dim product subcategory. Okay, now here, if I simply click OK, I've got these 4-5 columns. Click OK, and here you will notice for the dim product subcategory, you've got this value field. Now, this value field is basically used when you want to expand your table very easily without writing complex joins. So in such a case here, the product key is connected to the table, and here in the dim product subcategory column, we will be having an expansion of it and the updates will be shown. So here what we are going to do is we're going to first select the full list of the columns and then work with the data. So here I'm going to go ahead and expand this product subcategory. So this is how you expand and look into the next part of it. So once we do this, then I'm going to go ahead and pick up or remove all the columns. So here you can say, if you want, you can select all the columns or you can select certain columns that are there. Okay. So in such a case, I will also remove this use original column prefix. Okay. And amongst all these, pick up only English product subcategory and pick up dim product. Now, once you do this and click OK, here you can see there's a column that is going to be shown. Okay. That's called dim product. Now you can expand this if you want. So again, based on this, based on the product name, the product category is being found. Now, the next thing that you need to do is you need to look at the dim product subcategory as well. So here again, we expand the dim product field as well. So here I will expand this and I will uncheck everything. So here I need to look out for the dim product, English product category name. English product category name. One minute. Dim product subcategory. Let's expand this. English product subcategory name. Dim product category. Yes, this is what we need. Okay. So click on OK. Now I've got the product subcategory name. I need to expand this and I need to pull in the English product category name and click OK. So here now I've got the required stuff. I've got my product category. I've got the subcategory. I've got the product itself. So all these three are available and I can go ahead and perform the analysis in this later on. The next thing is I'm going to deal with the reseller table. Now in the reseller table, okay, should I say click unlock for 200 LU? Okay. Sir, I'm not known to this. Cyber gaming, with respect to SQL Server, this was just to show you the different data sources. You don't have to necessarily know how to use the SQL Server. You should just know how to create and connect to the SQL Server. That should be good enough for you. Like what I just did. I did not write any fancy query or anything. That's for data engineers and people after that. Okay, now come to the reseller query. First thing, rename it as reseller. And the next thing that we need is we need to remove all the columns except for reseller key, business type, reseller name, and dim geography. So I'm going to click on choose columns, go to choose columns once again, remove everything, keep reseller key, keep the business type. Then there's a reseller name, the name of the reseller. Then there is going to be the dim geography column. So here I can click on OK, and I will have only 4 columns available. Now, these resellers operate in certain geographical locations, and we need to ensure that we have that also available so that the analysis can be done easily. So I'm going to expand this, and this time around I'm going to use the uh, geographic columns that we need to work with. So we pick up city, and then there's a state province name that is there, and an English country region name. So these are the 3 columns that I will be referring to from this particular table. Now when I click OK, you will see there are 3 columns available: city, state, province, and English country region name. Now if you look at the business type column, okay, you can review the distinct values, and here you will see there's one distinct value which is warehouse with a space in between, and you need to fix that. So let's do that. Now in order to replace it, you will have to just right click on any one of the fields here under the name of the column and click on replace values. Now you have to first, okay, preferably click on warehouse because you don't have to write the spelling again. So here you can go and click replace values, and I will replace warehouse with a space with just warehouse. Okay, so wherever I had a problem with warehouse being spelled incorrectly, that should be taken care of. And this is now the next transformation for the reseller data. Now the next thing that you need to do is you need to go ahead and transform. So we need to rename some of the columns. I think we did need to rename some of the columns in the English product category, English product, the product table as well. So here I will first name English product name, which is the last column, with just product standard. Just a product, English product name to just product. Okay, then for the English product subcategory name, we'll call this as the subcategory with a C small. And English product category name, I'll just call it as category. Now, why are all these things being done? So that when we start the analysis, we don't end up making a mistake with that particular analysis. That is why we are using and performing these transformations. Okay, so we should have 6 columns and 397 rows in this particular table. That should be the case. Then we need to configure the reseller query. Now here, when you're configuring the reseller query, we are going to start off by first renaming the reseller. So we've already done it, and we need to now make some few changes towards the end of our transformation. So first and foremost, once you've completed the business type transformation, replace the values. Then what we are going to do is we're going to go to the business type column and rename this to business and space type. So when you type a space here, it becomes easy in terms of readability. But when you are working with databases, there you do not have spaces allowed. So you can use an underscore, or you can just use a camel case. Camel case is basically first alphabet of the first letter is capital, everything else is small. The first letter of the second word is capital, and then that keeps going on and on. Okay, so business type I've renamed. Reseller will be renamed. Reseller name that is there will be renamed by just, or renamed to just reseller. Then you are going to go ahead and replace the state province name with state hyphen province, and let's delete this. Now comes the English country region name. So this I'm going to rename it as country hyphen region. So we've got country and region already configured. So we should have about 6 columns and 701 rows of data. Now I'm going to do this quickly. So I'm going to go to dim sales territory. And here for dim sales territory, I'm going to just rename this to region. So I will rename the entire query to region. Now in this, I will be removing all the columns except for certain columns. So I'll click on the choose column and use the choose columns feature once again. And from here, I will require only sales territory key, then the territory region, the sales territory country, and the sales territory group. Okay, so these are the 4 columns required. We can just click on OK. And this is the 4 columns that we need to work with. Now rename some of the columns. So the sales territory region will be called as only region. Then the sales territory country will only be called as country, whereas sales territory group will be called as group. Okay, so we've got sales territory key, region, country, and group in the region table. Next is we go to the sales query. Now, in this, you've got the actual fact reseller sales table that you are going to be working with. So here, I'm going to go to the order. So there are certain columns that I need. Okay, first rename this to only sales. And then we are going to go ahead and make a few changes in terms of the columns that we require. So we go to choose columns, and from here I'm going to go ahead and pick up certain columns from here. So sales order number, then we've got order date, because that tells you when was the sale actually conducted, and based on that you can perform the analysis. So sales order number, order date, then the product key, then you've got the reseller key, your employee key. Okay, then you also have the sales territory key. Then we also need the order quantity. So these are all metrics: order quantity, then the unit price, total product cost, then the sales amount that we have worked with. Now after you've got this, the next thing that you will do is you'll click on OK. Okay, I think there was one more thing that we needed to do. Hold on. Okay, we need to connect to a dim product table. Now, in order to connect, or in order to fix a very important problem, we need to connect to that column as well. So here, if you see, I have got the dim product column. The reason is because if you see in the total product cost column, I've got certain empty values. That means 8% of my data is empty. Now, if I'm actually trying to take the profit of this data, or I'm trying to analyze the numbers, for that, I will need the appropriate product cost, because without that, I cannot proceed ahead. So I'm going to teach you how to resolve this problem. Okay. Now here we have the dim product column. Let's expand it. And from this, I will be working with just the standard cost column. So remove everything and pick up standard cost from the data that you have here. So here I'm going to pick up the standard cost column and click OK. Now, when you do this, you have a new column created, which is actually part of the other tables in the model. Okay. Now, what we need is we need to get the total product cost calculated. So in order to get the total product cost calculated, you will require the standard cost column, which is actually the price of one single product. So I'm going to multiply the order quantity by the total product, the order quantity by the unit price if the total product cost is not mentioned here. So that means I need to get the unit price multiplied by standard cost to get the total product cost for all those that are null. Okay. And for those that are not null, where the values are there, you just leave it as it is. So here I'm going to write my first query formula. I'm going to start with transform, and I'm going to go ahead, sorry, not transform, the add column option. And I'm going to go ahead with custom column. Now here you will need to put in the name of the column. And let's call this as cost. Now comes the calculation. So your formula is going to be if, okay, and then you put a space here, if total product cost. Now you start typing the name of the formula or the name of the column that you're interested in, and you will see in the autocomplete drop down using IntelliSense, this is giving you the calculation. So you hit the tab, you get if total product cost is equal to, and then you type null. Now remember, null is not 0. Keep that in mind. And 0 is not null. Null means nothing. You have not entered any data there. That's what null actually means, for those who don't know what it means. Now, if your total product cost is missing or does not show up there for any reason, what we need to do is then we type the formula manually, then order quantity. Order quantity will actually be given, okay, and you or pulled in, and you will multiply that by the standard cost column. Now this is what we are looking for. If the total product cost is nothing, then give the order quantity multiplied by standard cost. Okay, else sorry. Now after this you will put in the total product cost as it is. So if the total product cost is equal to null, in that case, when it's missing, you will multiply the order quantity by the standard cost. Otherwise, you leave it as it is. The total product cost is going to be good enough for you. So you have a new column created called as the cost column. So since we have the cost column available, I will select the standard cost column, and I will also look at the total product cost. These two columns will be removed. So I'm going to hit delete, and I'm going to remove those columns, and you can see there's a new step created called as removed columns in this particular case. Okay, now going ahead with the renaming of the columns. So first and foremost, we are going to remove the two columns that we've done. The next thing is going to be renaming the column. So order quantity will just be called as quantity. Then the next thing that you need is going to be the unit price column, which needs to be updated. So here in this case, I'm going to put a space for between unit and price, which gives you unit price. But the important thing is that in this kind of a situation, whenever you're working with your data, you have to ensure that you give names of the columns that are comprehensible by the consumers as well. Don't try to use very complex things or abbreviations a lot, because they will cause a problem for you. Next is the sales amount. So this I'm going to rename it just to sales. Okay, so we fixed this as well. Now we need to modify the data types in the data. So the first thing that we look at is when you look at a particular column and we expand, or we click on this button here for the data type for that particular column, you will see these are the data types that are available. So here I'm going to go ahead to the quantity, and I'm going to change it to, so I will go to quantity column, and here I'm going to change it to a to a whole number. Okay. Once you've done that, you will see that the type has been changed on the right hand side as well. Then you will look up for the whole number, and after that you will look up for the fixed decimal number. So unit price, so select each one of them by holding down the values and using the control key to select or to select multiple columns at the same time. So you've got unit price, sales, and cost. Now here I'm going to go to the transform tab, or maybe to the home tab, and from here I'm going to change the uh, data type. So change this data type to a fixed decimal number. Sorry, I think I made a mistake here. Change the data type to a fixed decimal number. So fixed decimal number, what this does is it gives you the ability to work with 19 digits and allows more precision for rounding errors, and it's great for financial value calculation, which is what we are actually looking at. Now this is the transaction table, so it will have too many rows with it. Okay. Now comes the reseller sales targets. Now this is an interesting part. Now, if you want to actually analyze this data, you need to have all your months in one column and all your calculations in the other column. That's the numbers. So I'm going to select only the first two columns because these are not to be unpivoted. They are already going to be used and it will automatically unpivot the data for you. Now, what unpivoting does is unpivoting is basically taking the data from the detailed data and bringing it to the lower level of detail. So in such a case, what we will do is we will go ahead and under the transform option, you have this pivot column and unpivot columns. Pivot is basically converting or getting the you can say detailed data or consolidating it, but unpivoting is entirely opposite of that. So if I've selected these two and I don't click on this, if I click directly on unpivot columns, it'll unpivot everything or just the two columns. Here I will say unpivot other columns because they were less in number, so I unpivoted other columns. Now in this case, you can see you've got attribute and you've got value. Now attribute basically means month one, month two, and so on and so forth for different years. So first thing, I'm going to go and remove this hyphen from the value column. The reason is because we want only the numbers. Now there's still a problem. We don't know, like we have to create a date based calculation. So we have the month but written in a different way, and then we've got the year as well. So in order to create a date column in this particular targets table, I will be requiring to work with this add column feature where I'll bring the column in from examples. So before we do that, what we are going to do is we are going to notice and work with the filtered data. So you can see there's about 809 rows. Now if you look at this from the beginning here, you can see you have 81 rows, and then at this point you have 972 rows. So if you actually do a multiplication of 81 by 12, you are going to get 972. Okay. So I come back to my last step, filtered rows, which I filtered out the hyphens. Now here I'm going to rename the attribute to month number column, month number. And then I'm going to also go ahead and replace the values M in the data. So I'll right click and click on replace values. And let's use the value M and replace it with a blank and click OK. So you will see that I have got rid of the value M from there, or the number M, and we just have the month number. Now what we are going to do is I'm going to click on this button here and I'm going to change it to a whole number. So now my value is going to be sorted and I'm going to get the treatment for my month number and I'm going to be able to work with it. Now here we are going to go ahead and add a column. So use this add column tab and click on column from examples. Now when you click on column from examples, you will enter the name of the, or you will enter the first value of the column. So I'm going to enter 1/7/2017, which is 1st of July 2017. So I can type here 1-7-2017, which is the year. Sorry, my bad. Okay, so it has automatically picked up the data, but I think there is still a problem with this. Uh, it was 1.7. Okay, 1.8. Okay, so I think that is sorted. We've got the data updated, and this is the English Indian format. So I click OK, and I allow it to be added. So I have a new column called merged, which is actually your date for the target. Okay. Now here the predicted values have automatically been picked up because that has been one of the intelligent aspects of working with Power Query. So remove the following columns. The year column and the month number column are not required. We select them and delete them. As far as the target column, so sorry, as far as the value column will be renamed, okay, as target. First thing, let's rename this merged column as target month, okay, and change this to a date data type. For value, you will call this as target. And as far as the data type is concerned, you will call this as the whole number, because these are whole numbers. And also what I'm going to, or 1 minute, I think we will change it to a decimal number. Okay, and now I will multiply this entire column by 1000 because these are all in thousands actually. So for that, I'm going to select the column, and under the transform tab, you've got this number column standard. Now you will set this up and you will multiply this by 1000. So why are we multiplying it by 1000? When we multiply it by 1000, what we get is the target value. Okay, so we have got 3 columns and 809 rows. Now all these transformations are really great. So now we'll move ahead, and you can see here I've got color, background color, and font color, which is in the first row. So I'll just click on this drop down and I will use this first row as headers. Now once I do this, I've got my calculations done. Okay, now I am going to load this data, but before I load it, I will show you how to work with the multiple tables and create merging of queries, like something which you call as VLOOKUP in Excel. So here I've got a product table. I'm going to select that and I'm going to click on merge queries. When I click on merge queries, it is going to pick up the products table on top, and in the bottom I'm going to use color formats. Now if you see, there's a color and color field in common between them. We just leave them and we click OK. Now I go to my products table and I can expand this color formats query to uncheck everything, and I'm looking at the background color and the font color and click OK. So this way I've got the background color and the font color, and what I have done is I've merged my queries to get the actual data. So I've configured everything, I've set up everything with respect to the merging, etc. Now you can see all the queries are there. Now it's time to load your data. So just go to close and apply. When you click close and apply, in your data pane, you will see all the queries being loaded for you. So we'll wait for a few seconds and we'll see that the data has been completely loaded. Okay, Prabhat, now you've asked me, why are we doing this manual process? This is not a manual process. Please understand that this data transformation is happening in Power Query, so that whenever there's new data that comes in, all this process does not need to be followed, or you don't have to go into the data and perform all these cleaning tasks again. I've already done this in the past. I'm just using a different case study. So if you've been there for all the other sessions, you would know exactly what is happening as well. Okay, so we are using Power Query. It's basically for cleaning and transforming your data before going and analyzing and modeling the data. Now if you see, if I go to the model view, now I did not switch off the automatic relationships. That's why I've got all these relationships set up. Now, before I do anything, let me just zoom out very quickly to see all my tables at the same time. I'll start by bringing in my sales table in the center, and I will place my other tables around it. Okay, these uh, relationships that are there, I'll just delete them. So I've got my salesperson, I've got my salesperson region. I'll delete this as well. So I've got salesperson, I've got the region, and then I've got the product table. So I actually don't need the color formats inside this. So one important thing that I should have done is when I transform the data, I will right click on this and say disable load. So when I do that, I can go back and load it. And when I load it, that will now disappear. So I've got my reseller. Okay. Now for product column, I will be using the product key and the product key over here. So let me just zoom in for you to show this to you. So I've got product key and product key. So I'll drag product key and I will place it onto product key here to create the relationship based on the product key and click save. Again, for my reseller, I will use reseller key and reseller key here and click 1:many and click OK or save it. Now all my relationships have been declared or made. Now I can go ahead and plan and work with my data. So I can go to the report view and I can start analyzing my data. So I'll start by clicking on the sales here and I will start by picking up my sales data. So this is my total sales. So here I will go ahead and make changes. So I'll go to the sales column and I will change it to a dollar formatting. And once I have changed it to a dollar formatting, I can now go ahead and break it down by category and perform the analysis the way I would want to perform it. Okay. So here we have completed the entire process of working, loading, and setting up the data with all the data modeling steps. Now in this, due to the time constraints, I will not be able to cover everything. But here, if I go to my data model, I can create my simple hierarchies. So I can start off with category, subcategory. So I'll right click on this, create new hierarchy. And I'm going to call this as products with an S. Here I will add new levels, subcategory, and the product and click apply level changes. So my products hierarchy is created. I can now go ahead to my report view and instead of product category, I can add the products hierarchy, which will allow me to drill down into the data by going to the next level or maybe to drill down further based on the fields that I select in the data. Okay. So similarly, you can see that under the region table also you have group, country, and region. Group basically means the continent, and within that there are certain countries that the company is catering to. So you can create these hierarchies as well. Then in the reseller, you can create two hierarchies. One is a business type and second is the reseller. Within the reseller table, you have one more hierarchy that's possible, that is country, region, state, province, and city. These are the two hierarchies that can be created here. So other than that, I think we don't have any hierarchies that can be created anywhere else. So that's about your data modeling part, which you can work with. So I've shown you how to create hierarchies here as well. Now going on to work with another important calculation. So we just have about, I'll just take about another 2 to 3 minutes for explaining how to work with the calculate function. Now calculate function is something that is a very important function. Let me show you that as well, because that is a function that is useful for working with the skipping of the filter context. Now, if you see here, I'm currently looking at sales. Okay. Now, what if I want to see the total sales? Okay. Because when I click on products, it will give me the total sales of all the products broken down. Now, what I will try to do is I want to do a comparison of the total sales of bikes against components, clothing, and accessories. So I will go to my sales table and I will click on a new measure. Now in this measure, I will use or I will create a new measure called as total sales for bikes. Now what I will do is normally when I create a measure, just a total sales, it will always work with the filter. Whenever I apply a filter, it will be applied. Here what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the calculate function. Now what calculate does is it evaluates an expression in a context modified by filters. What this essentially means is that whenever you're working with your data, whenever you're taking sales, if any filter is applied on the field that you're using, it will not, it will actually filter the data for you. For example, here, it's filtering the data based on bikes, components, clothing, and accessories. But here I will show you how I can always calculate the bikes calculation. So I will say, I want to take the sum of the sales column from the sales table. Okay. But the filter is based on the product category. So product category is equal to, and then in double quotes I will, or single quotes I will write, bikes. Now when I do this, what this does is it creates a total sales for bikes filter measure for me. I'll just change it to dollar formatting. Okay. And let me add it to this visual. So when I add it to the visual and I create a simple clustered bar chart for it. 1 minute. What did I make? Okay. Here. So here you can see I have added one field, that is sales, and one measure. Now what this is doing, that this total sales for bikes, it is ignoring the filter that is being applied on the category column, but that is only for the category column that it will kind of ignore the filters. But let's say if I remove category and if I add, let's say, region or group, in that case it will work exactly the same way as a normal sum of sales calculation. But if I add category, in that case this total sales for bikes will always show total sales for bikes and nothing else. Okay. So I think this is what we are kind of, I wanted to show you right from scratch for today's session, because it was more of a SQL data insertion and dealing with the various relationships, modeling, cleaning, transformation. So I've shown you a majority of the transformations in today's session. So I think we'll close the session for today. Thank you everyone for being part of this particular bootcamp, and I think I hope to see you in the upcoming bootcamps by Let's Upgrade. So please do practice whatever we've done and have a great future ahead. Thank you everyone.